This is Horror Podcast.
Welcome to This is Horror, a podcast for readers, writers, and creators. I'm Michael David Wilson, and every episode I chat with the world's best writers about writing, life lessons, creativity, and much more. Today is the first part in a two-part conversation with Ross Jeffery. Now this one was actually recorded back in September last year, within a few months of the first time that Ross was on the show. But I wanted to give both of those conversations some breathing room, and that is why you're now getting this one at the end of January. In the July recording with Ross, we spoke all about his writing methodology and routine, but we didn't talk much about his books. And that is why I invited him back on the show for this one. So get ready to learn much more about Ross Jeffery and his wonderful books, including Juniper, The Devil's Pocketbook, and Only the Stains Remain. But before any of that, a quick advert break.
From the host of This Is Horror Podcast comes a dark thriller of obsession, paranoia, and voyeurism. After relocating to a small coastal town, Brian discovers a hole that gazes into his neighbor's bedroom. Every night she dances and he peeps. Same song, same time, same wild and mesmerizing dance. But soon Brian suspects he's not the only one watching, and she's not the only one being watched. Their watching is The Wicker Man meets Body Double with a splash of Suspiria. They're Watching by Michael David Wilson and Bob Pastorella is available from thisishorror.co.uk, Amazon, and wherever good books are sold.
It was as if the video had unzipped my skin, slunk inside my tapered flesh, and become one with me.
From the creator of This Is Horror comes a new nightmare for the digital age, The Girl in the Video by Michael David Wilson. After a teacher receives a weirdly arousing video, his life descends into paranoia and obsession. More videos follow, each containing information no stranger could possibly know. But who's sending them, and what do they want? The answers may destroy everything and everyone he loves. The Girl in the Video is The Ring meets Fatal Attraction for the iPhone generation. Available now in paperback, ebook, and audio.
Okay, well, here it is. It is Ross Jeffery on This Is Horror. Ross, welcome back to This Is Horror.
Thank you for having me yet again. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be talking with you. And this is the point where I'd ordinarily ask what have been the big changes since you were last on the show. I kind of know some of these changes because we've been talking quite regularly, but for the listeners who presumably have not hacked into our WhatsApp messaging,
Yes.
what's been going on yet? What's been going on both personally and professionally?
So, personally, so it's my daughter's birthday today. She is fast asleep after a very exciting day. And earlier on this week, I finished my 14th book, which, if you were listening to the last episodes, you know I write quite a lot. This book, I started writing last year in October, and I would generally finish it in 2 months. But then in November, our landlord put our rent up by £1,000 a month to £2,500. So then we kind of couldn't afford that because that's more than I actually earn. And then I just stopped writing for about, I think it was about 7 months. And the manuscript was at about 40,000 words. And then, we went homeless. A friend of ours called David said, "Look, come and live with in my house." Like, it was temporary accommodation, but we moved in there, put everything in storage. Managed to get a mortgage, and then bought a house in Wales. So we actually moved country, but not very far. But we're in a different country now. And then this month, I reopened the Word file and reread it all, and then just started afresh. And so probably 3 weeks, I've finished the novel, so it's now about 78k. But yeah, all done, dusted. Our early morning texts were very inspirational to keep me on the go, as you were slamming keys your end and I'm slamming keys my end. But yeah, it's good. It's a good place to be. And normally I have a little whiskey to celebrate each book when I finish it, and I hadn't had the opportunity, so I'm having one now whilst we talk.
Very nice stuff. And what is the whiskey in question?
It is the Singleton 12-year-old single malt. I've got a cupboard in there full of whiskies because parents and people keep buying me bottles for birthdays and Christmas, and I normally just drink it when I've finished a book, so I've just got loads of whiskey to drink through. But yeah, it's very nice. Recommended.
So I think now we're finding out, actually, this is the real reason why you write so quickly, because you've set this rule that you can only drink the whiskey when you finish the story. So, yeah, we thought you all just really enjoyed.
Yeah.
We thought you enjoyed writing and completing books, but actually you just like drinking whiskey. And I mean, we should say as well, if it wasn't clear, that, last time we spoke, you were talking about you only write on Fridays. For this book that you finished, you were writing, probably 5 out of 7 days a week.
Yeah, I just, because normally it is a Friday, and the difference this time as to why I was writing every day is because it's summer holidays here and my children are off school. So my usual Friday is taken up by doing family stuff, which is great. I've been to a couple of castles and other ruins in Wales. There's a lot of ruins in Wales. And yeah, just doing that kind of stuff. So what I was doing is getting into work extra early so that I could sit down and spend like an hour and a half just getting words on the page. And most of those sessions ended in about, like between 1.8 to 2.5k each time, and it just builds up. If you do it every day, that's what happens. But come September, starting a new book and going to be doing it on Fridays because the rest of the week will be working. But it'll be a nice quiet house. I can listen to my music and then ponder the next book.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later because that is something that I have a vested interest in, let's say, but we're going to save that for later because I want to talk about, completing this book that you've just finished. Obviously, it has taken place during this chaotic, to put it bluntly, but to also understate it, period of your life, probably one of the worst periods of your life. Is there some sort of psychological relief to have now done that, post homelessness and when you had to put the writing on hold for a bit?
Yeah, like it was really weird because I was writing it and every day I was getting closer to the kind of the end goal. And I think this is because every book's different, but this one, just like when I finished typing, and I had the story in there, I just felt like a massive relief. It's odd because the book doesn't deal with those kind of themes, but I think it was just drenched in that kind of like difficult period. And I think also just moving into this kind of new home where hopefully I will write many, many more books. But having that first book written in this home is kind of like the new starting point.
And I assume too, from what we've spoken about before, that this was a book which kind of took the longest and meant that you had this break between not just drafts, but a break within a draft. What was it like to have put it aside when it was incomplete and then not only return to it, but obviously because of that period of time, have to reread everything? Do you think it enhanced the process? Do you think there were challenges? Is it something that you would now, having done it, actively and deliberately look at doing again?
I don't think I would ever do it again. I think I don't know if we spoke about it in the podcast last time or if it was in the after bit. But like when I'm writing, like I need to get. So if I'm writing a chapter or a couple of chapters, I make sure I've got enough time to write that chapter completely, so I don't have to come back to it. And this one, yeah, I don't think I would ever do it again because I was rereading it because I printed it off to reread, and then as I was rereading it, I was like just adding notes to kind of like bits because although I'd stopped writing, my head had carried on writing. So when I sat down to write it, I kind of knew the direction, and it kind of changed a little bit from my original. Whether that was the external factors coming in on me or not, but and I was like, right, okay, I need to remember that when I go back to edit the whole thing. And I made loads of notes, and rereading it was good and helped hone it. I think the only way I'm going to tell because the voice of the piece as well, because when I started writing it, I was in one frame of mind before anything had happened. And then after is after, and all that stuff had gone by. And I think I got back into the headspace. I think the only person that's going to tell me if there's a definite kind of change is going to be my editor, Andy, when he gets hold of it. Austrian Spencer is his kind of handle on social media. And it'd be interesting to see if he can see where I stopped and where I restarted. But from what I've done and read, and I finished it and I was rereading bits as I was writing it, I think I've successfully managed to keep the tone all the way through, aided by listening to the same soundtrack when I was writing it. So that kind of hopefully underscored everything I've written. But yeah, like leaving something that long, like I was, because I've never done that before, so I was also doubting myself before I started writing, and then I almost was going to just leave it and put it on hold and just maybe never pick it up again, because it was quite obviously that whole experience. But that would be like partly reanimating a body. So I was just like, no, I've got to give it like a heart and lungs and finally just bring it to life. So yeah, just dived back in, and it just felt so good, and like to be back writing, to be kind of just going about my daily routine and thinking about the book, and on my commute to Bristol from Wales, like just making notes in my head so that when I got to work I was like, oh yeah, that's where that bit goes. And so yeah, it was great. But yeah, I would never, I say never, but hopefully I'll never have to leave a book so long before I finish it. And yeah, it's I don't know, it might work for some people, but for me it was driving me nuts that there was a half finished book just waiting for me.
And you said that during the writing you were listening to one album on repeat. This is something that we've mentioned a little bit offline and in our private conversations, but what I'm wondering is, how do you decide what album to listen to? Is it just a case of this is an album that I really like? Or do you try to look at kind of a link between the album and the tone that you're going for in the novel? Or are there other factors at play?
So any music I listen to is purely instrumental. That's one major thing. I tend to try, because there's a few composers that I like. So like Hans Zimmer, Benjamin Wallfish, they're two of my favourites. The Newton Brothers do some great stuff as well. And then James Newton Howard. I think that's kind of like my favourites. When kind of choosing a soundtrack, it's normally I'll kind of think of the themes of the book and kind of maybe even the genre. So I wrote a book recently called Cradle of Glass, which is with my agent, Elizabeth Copps. And that's a kind of bit more science fiction. It's still got its feet in the horror, but it's I'd say it's science fiction first. And for that one, I listened to Interstellar, like on repeat, and that's how I listen to the song, just so I can make sure that the story in my mind is just underscored by that kind of tone of the album. And for this one that I just finished, I was listening to Alien Romulus by Benjamin Wallfish, and yeah, like that one's a bit darker and there's a lot of kind of strings and things like that. So I think that helped keep the mood of the book. And it's so weird because when I listen to an album so frequently when I'm writing, if I hear that music when I'm not at the desk, I can remember certain scenes that I wrote whilst it was playing, and they play back in my mind. So when I got back to, and I listen to them on vinyl normally when I'm at home, so this one was a bit strange because I was listening to it on my phone in the office typing. Yeah, it just helped ease me back into the book because I could just feel all the kind of emotions and everything when I was writing it previously were just flowing back into it. I think listening to the music when I'm writing as well also helps pace the book, which is odd because it keeps on kind of like the tracks change, but for me the pace is in the whole album, so it's just listening to that and then just getting the flow of it. And deciding on an album normally is either, because I buy quite a lot of vinyl records, so it's normally one that I may have bought that I've not listened to yet, because sometimes I buy vinyls without having seen the film because I want to just listen to the music without the film's kind of influence. So I do have every now and then I'll probably have like 5 or 6 to pick from, and then yeah, when I'm writing a book, I will buy if I haven't got it, and I think like maybe I've watched the film and I'm like, oh, that's a really good soundtrack. I always buy myself a copy just so I've got like a little keepsake afterwards as well. But I've got a few lined up for my next project, so I've just got those in the background, which I'm kind of listening to just see which one would be the tone for the next book. But yeah, and it's something I only developed kind of, I think when I wrote The Devil's Pocketbook was the first time that I'd got a soundtrack and just listened to that whilst I was writing. Normally I just have either silence or just other music on in the background with words, which is a nightmare because I was writing Juniper once and I had John Denver playing in the background and I wrote a whole paragraph that was just his words, not mine. But yeah, so now I just listen to instrumental, and that's mainly Josh Malaman's influence, because I think he does similar technique, and I was just like, oh, that sounds good, I'll try that, and not look back.
Yeah, I can't listen to music with words unless it's so obscure black metal that I can't make out the words. But actually, because I listen to a lot of extreme metal, I found that with a lot of death metal, I can't listen to it because I've got quite good at just tapping in and knowing exactly what they're saying, even though it's in this growly voice. But black metal is often distorted enough that it's like, just don't concentrate on the lyrical part and you'll be fine and it will be instrumental. But as I said to you in a text message, sometimes I have to be careful too, because if the soundtrack is too dramatic, even though there aren't words, I'm tapping into just like I'm enjoying that music too much and it's becoming distracting. So yeah, I almost have to start writing, put something on and just see, is this the vibe? Is this allowing me to write to it? So at the moment, I've been listening to a lot of albums by the band Russian Circles. That just seems to have the right kind of balance in terms of what I need to just hone in and to focus on the work. And I mean, you're absolutely right that if we repeat a band or an album enough, then when we hear it later, it brings us back to the place that we were when we were listening to it. And I've definitely found that with writing, but I found it with other events in my life. And funnily enough, when I was reading Nosferatu by Joe Hill, a lot of that, I was commuting to work on a noisy train. So I just put something on to get rid of that. And mostly it was the soundtrack to the video game Silent Hill Downpour. So if ever I hear that, or probably if I were to go back and play the game, I'd then just be thinking of the Joe Hill book, which is kind of cool in a way. It's combining two horrors. Yeah.
Just meshed together.
Yeah, I'm expecting Charlie Manx in his massive car from Nosferatu to show up, but actually it's going to be a kind of mutated nurse. So yeah, there's no question attached to that. Just waiting for some kind of response. Like
it's interesting. That's an interesting flip on Silent Hill and Nosferatu.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of down for anything that Joe Hill does, and I'm down for any Silent Hill game. So if they want some weird collaboration, that's absolutely fine.
You're front of the queue.
Yeah, just Charlie Manx turning up in Silent Hill. What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not a lot. There's not a lot of children in Silent Hill, which is kind of his MO. He's just going to turn around.
Turn around and walk away.
Yeah. But, talking about books, last time we spoke, we didn't even get into any of your books or any specifics. So it seems smart if we start with the Juniper Trilogy. So, I mean, firstly, did you always know it was going to be a trilogy? And if not, what were the seeds that presented that to you?
The short answer is no. I didn't think it was going to be. I didn't even think it was going to be a book when I wrote it. So, because it was during COVID, and I was just like, I had more time, and I'd written short stories before. Thought I'd give it a go writing something longer. So I started writing Juniper, and just absolutely loved it. Like, there's so. It might be different, but I love the difference between writing a short story and a long story. I say long because novellas can be longer, but the way I was able to kind of riff and go off in different tangents and things like that is just not what you can do in short stories. And I just loved that, like just expanding characters with just kind of little kind of just tidbits that you could just chuck in there and be like, oh yeah, that's quite cool. I'll add that to that character and I'll do that. And then the town started to kind of just build around these characters, and I was just taken with it, which is weird because I created it. So I was just like, oh yeah, that person could live there and that could do that. It wasn't until I started writing, because I really like writing horrible characters. It wasn't until I started writing weird characters and like nasty characters that I was like, oh, actually, I think this town, just by the introduction of Klein, who's the antagonist in Juniper, I was like, yeah, he's got a whole backstory that I'd really love to delve into, but I can't in this because I wanted to keep it short because I didn't want to lose control of it. And then as I finished the book, loved the process of it. And yeah, I haven't stopped since, but like as soon as I finished it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to write a novel. And it was, yeah, like I literally finished that, put it aside, edited it, and, you know, had other kind of things going on, which we spoke about in the previous podcast. And then I was just like, yeah, I'm going to write a full novel because that's what you do, isn't it? I sat down and I was just contemplating what I was going to do, and I wanted to do something a bit different. So I wrote Tome, which is the prequel to Juniper. So we went backwards kind of 15 years, and the story centered around Klein. It doesn't really center around him. He's in it, but as a younger person, and you kind of get to see how he became the person that he was in Juniper. And I loved writing that book. I love writing all my books, but that book in particular, like I felt like I'd grown when I was writing it. I felt that it just all fell into place. And then and that was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award, which was, in my mind, was absolutely mental. Because I'd written Juniper, lots of stuff was said about that. And then I wrote Tome, and it just blew me away. Like, I didn't expect it to be read as widely as it was. I didn't expect it to be nominated for an award. And then it was also nominated for a Splatterpunk Award in the same year. And it just blew me away because I'm just sitting there writing, never written before, and just started picking up a pen. I don't do that. Typing on my computer. And just made like some connections with podcasters and like book reviewers and things like that. And like Sadie Hartman was a massive champion of the books, which was incredible. And then, yeah, like Michael Clark. And I met lots of people through writing Tome who are still dear friends, and that was great. And then I wrote a couple of books in between, and I kind of thought the story wasn't finished. Had lots of people asking me if there was going to be another book. And then the weirdest thing happened was that a publisher contacted me out of the blue and said that they wondered if it was going to be a trilogy. And I said, yeah. I said, I haven't written the third book, but yes, it's going to be. And that publisher said, okay, we want to re-release Juniper, Tome, and we want the third book. And I was like, okay. As I said, I've not written the third book, but I can do that. And it's the first time I ever wrote to a deadline, and I wouldn't recommend it. I don't really like it. I felt a lot of pressure because also it's a third book. I didn't want it to be rubbish. And then I as you know from my sketchbooks and stuff, just sat down, started sketching stuff out, working out kind of structure and things. And then I thought, okay, well, this book's going to be set 15 years after Juniper. So it goes Juniper, then backwards, and then right forwards to the kind of end. And there's characters that pop up through all the books, so you can kind of follow people throughout. And it just spilled out of me quicker than I thought it would, because I was writing to a deadline. But and then the publisher that said that they would do it then took loads of pre-orders and then decided they weren't going to publish it. So then I just released it by myself. The annoying thing was I took Juniper and Tome out of publication for it, and it had been out of publication. Well, basically, I was nominated for the Bram Stoker Award, and then a couple of months later, I just stopped it. So it couldn't be purchased anywhere, and that annoyed me slightly, because it was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award, so I'm assuming there would have been some interest in people wanting to buy it and read it. But things happen, you move on. And so I re-released them. Had Daniel Serra covers made for them all, which were going to be with the publisher, but the publisher allowed me to keep those. So I re-released them all in hardback, and they all fit together. So if you hold them all face up, it's just a long picture of Juniper all the way across through the seasons that are in the books. And I like it. It's a great little series. Lots of people come to read the rest of my stuff through Juniper and Tome, and they just stick around, which is lovely. I've got a good little following through that. I'd love them to be read more widely, but I'm happy with the kind of who's reading them, picking them up, and I hope as well when you read them, it kind of shows my growth as an author, because obviously when I went back and read Juniper when I was writing the third book, when I was trying to just make sure I didn't mess up the timelines and stuff, I was also like, this is a great book, but yeah, I've grown since I wrote it, and I could tell when I wrote it. So that doesn't put anyone off. It's a great book, but I could see my progression, which is great, because it shows I'm developing and moving forward. But yeah, so the answer to the question was no, I didn't believe it was going to be a trilogy, but it turned out to be a very good one.
Yeah, I certainly see the Juniper Trilogy as a season of your work. And then kind of if we look at particularly Only the Stains Remain, The Devil's Pocketbook, and I Died Too, But They Haven't Buried Me Yet, that feels another kind of season. That feels like this is grief horror. This is what Josh Malerman was talking about when he said something along the lines of, you are the master of grief horror. And so we're going to get to that season in a bit, but for the Juniper Trilogy season, I mean, something that I'm sure will stand out to readers if they're familiar with who you are and where you're from is that you decided, for your first book to set it in America. And it's got such a distinct American voice. It's almost a little bit, there's a disconnect. It's like, wait, did Ross become American? What's happened here? Did you live a past life and you've tapped into it? Because it feels very authentic. And so, I mean, firstly, let's talk about the decision to set it in America, to embark upon writing this series in America, even though you've admitted that you didn't even know it was going to be a book or a trilogy. So it wasn't so conscious to commit for such a long time. And then also, what were some of the challenges of that?
Well, thank you. That is a very huge compliment. So when I decided to write it, I think I'd spoken about this on a couple of other podcasts as well, but and I think we spoke about it before. For me, when I was growing up, horror was American. I know we had James Herbert and other great British horror writers, but like I grew up not really reading much, but watching a ton of horror, and all of it, what I would say the good stuff. The majority of it was all American. So, and it just seems to be the way that's how I viewed horror, is that it was American first, and then we tried to get in there. And yeah, when I started writing, I was just like, yeah, no, I'm going to set it in this kind of like weird, kind of almost pre-apocalyptic town where you're not quite sure what's going on. Because I did a bit of research before, and like just like some of the isolation in America, that is kind of like poverty and isolation, and families that live in the sticks and don't see anyone for like months or years. And I forgot what that family's called, but the family that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was kind of like based around. I was just like, there must be places in America that are kind of like towns that are just on the periphery, that people just drive through or round and don't really stop. And I was just like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. That's great. And then I was like, oh yeah, crap, I'm English. I was just like, I need to really nail this, because if I get things wrong, people are going to notice. If the language is off slightly, if I've got kind of British kind of flourishes in there of characters saying something like, oh, you blooming better come back here. I was like, they're going to know. So I just tried really hard to just not do that. I had another writer called Joseph Sale. He helped me edit this one. I was friends with him beforehand, and he does editing and is a very great writer as well. And so he helped me kind of hone it once it was done. And I think there was one thing that I got wrong, and people pointed it out, was that I think something about the roadkill. I think I said something like I can't remember if it was an armadillo. It's been a long time since I wrote. Like maybe an armadillo or something was just run over in the road, and then they were like, well, because you mentioned the surrounding outskirts and like what's near it, that animal is not like native to that part of America. It's somewhere else, and so that's it ruined the whole book for me. I was like, okay.
No, you should have said,
Yeah.
wow, if it was not native but it showed up and got ran over, what kind of shit out of X-Files is happening? What dimension was opened up?
But yeah, and like when I released it, it was great. Like it did really well, and lots of, because it's, I don't know, I think, and also this came apparent as I've been writing, but the horror scene in America, and it's obviously due to population, but most, well, I'd probably say the majority of my readership is American. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't know whether British people are just a bit like, oh, what's horror? But lots of my readership are American, and when I released it, they kind of took me to heart and the book, and yeah, and some of the issues not issues, but things I had to think about a lot were just the Englishness and the Americanisms, and like a car boot is a trunk, and like just all those kind of bits that just to give it the flavour that it needs, I had to just make sure I went through it with a fine-tooth comb and just pulled anything out that was like pants and trousers and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really grateful that you said that it sounded American and like the characters, because that I wanted the way they spoke to be authentic. And if you've seen that, that's amazing. And then with Tome, that was that was a whole different ball game. I had to spend a lot of time with a developmental editor with that one, because I was that one's set in a prison. The whole book is set in a prison, so I was obviously writing about a period of time and about the American prison system, and like they opened my eyes to lots of things, because there was certain, like the way I visualized it on the page, and they were like, yeah, you might have to change that because at that period there wouldn't have been that type of thing. And I was just like, and it was incredible. And for the life of me, I can't think of the editor that I used for that one. I only used them for that book, but they were recommended to me, and they did a marvelous job at it. And that's what editors do, and they're incredible. And yeah, and that one was great. And by the time I'd written the third one, I was like, I kind of know this town. I know how I'm speaking. I know what they're going to sound like, and I've already mapped it out. So I kind of had that kind of landscape. And there's scenes in each of the. I'm going off topic here, but there's scenes in each of the books that I think, like when I wrote them, I was just like, oh crap! Like it made me like shudder, because they were a little bit like, oh. So I know that they're kind of the horror is in them, and that it's well written, because it scared me when I was writing it. But yeah, there's some scenes, and like to hear people like when they review them or have like done a video review or whatever, when they highlight those scenes in particular, I was like, oh, that's when I actually scared myself when I was writing, which is great because it came across on the page. But yeah, like for me, horror has always been American, but after those books, I was kind of like, no, I want to reclaim horror as being English as well, or British. I was like, yeah, I'm going to start setting my books here, just because it takes away a lot of me just having to remember all the things that I had to learn during that trilogy. And yeah, we got a lot of horrors here as well.
I have plenty to say about British authors writing for a predominantly American audience, or not so much writing for, but having an awareness that is the bulk of your readers, because it's, a similar thing for me. But before I get into that, I do just have to say, I mean, with Juniper, generally, there's a rawness to it. It's almost like the garage band recording, but in a really good way. Like I felt like you just didn't give a fuck in terms of content, in terms of convention, in terms of pushing the limits. I mean, I think it was Tome that won the Splatterpunk Award, but if anything ever just embedded that punk rock splatterpunk no shits given aesthetic. It's the first book, it's Juniper, and I mean, from right off the bat, like, within I guess it was the first few pages, just revealing these interbred cats. And
Yeah.
what is going on here? There was something of a kind of younger Jack Ketchum, and an unfiltered Jack Ketchum, which sounds ridiculous for anyone who's read his work, because like, well, when was he filtered? When was there censorship? But God, Bob talks often about fearless writing. Just took it to a whole new level. I don't think fear ever entered the equation for you. I mean, if I didn't know that you only drink whiskey to celebrate the end of books, I'd have thought this was some drug-fueled, crazed book. But, everything I'm saying, I mean it as a compliment. And, how you didn't get cancelled or upset a tremendous amount of people, and actually you got the opposite. You got someone like Sadie Hartman, Mother Horror, actually championing it.
Yeah,
Incredible.
When I think of the content and like just how balls to the wall crazy it is, and all the cat stuff, and just like I had a lot of stuff in my mind, like lots of different stories and things, and I was just like, right, let's just go for this and let's just see where it goes. And like, you know, at that point I started reading quite a lot, so I was like, you know, I had read Jack Ketchum and Adam Neville and Paul Tremblay and Josh Malerman and stuff like that, and I was just kind of like, and also read a lot of like loads of like indie writers, which when I was reading them, I was like, man, these guys are on fire! Like, these are so good. And at that point, I never, like, when I was reading those, I kind of like just felt like I'd snuck in the back door somewhere, and I was like, oh, look at all these amazing authors that are just like releasing these books, but like when I talked to people about them, they'd never heard of them, and then I was just like, this is like a gold mine of like talent, and I was just like, yeah, let's just go for it. Like, I've not written a book. If this turns, like, because at that point I was like, I don't even know if this is going to be a book. Like, I was just like, yeah, let's just go for it. Let's just write this about this crazy town with crazy people in it, and you know, it's a little bit weird, a little bit crazy, but I just needed something to hang that craziness on. And I think with Betty and Janet in it, and then having Klein as the kind of protagonist or antagonist, it just worked. And there is a kind of like, I'd say, twist in it. A lot of readers don't get it, but the book still plays out if they don't get it or if they do get it. And I think that was one of the keys, because when people have read it and they've got it, they've just been like, man, this is the most crazy, depraved thing I've ever read. And then like some people are just like, oh, what did you get from it? And then they'd say, we'll have to go off chat to talk about it. And then they'd tell them, and then they're like, oh my goodness, yeah. So I think that is the kind of, like, it was the key to the book, is that it's written in such a way that if you get it, then all these dominoes fall into place that have taken part throughout the book, and you're just sickened even more by it. But yeah, at the time I was just like, let's just have fun, let's just do it. And then I think Tome is a very good follow-up with the kind of the tone of the book, or the series. And yeah, no idea why I haven't been cancelled. Who knows? But yeah, I just like pushing limits. And a thing I think that people forget sometimes is that the person behind those words is an actual human. And although we write these things, it's not how we are as a person. And, I've had a lot of people that speak to me, and, even family, when they've read a book, or friends, they read a book and they're just like, I can't believe that came out of your mind, because you don't come across like this person at all. Like, you're quite reserved, and you don't, jump on and like pile on arguments and things, or you don't have many opinions. So I'm just like, yeah, it's because I don't, and I just like writing, and the characters I'm just giving them life on the page. And a lot of that is through people that I've met. I've met a lot of horrible people. And I just kind of store that stuff up. And I'm just like, if I hear something and I think, oh, that you are a despicable person, I'm like, but I could use that. I just store these things away, and then they just give life to characters that people absolutely hate. But that person is not the person who's written it. It's a character on the page. And I think a lot of readers sometimes forget that. And I think Eric LaRocca is a perfect example, because he gets absolutely slated all the time, and he's an absolutely lovely person. But they have to deal with all this kind of backlash of, oh, they're absolutely sick and twisted, and they must do that in their actual lives and all this. And it's like, no, they're writing a book. Like, just give them a break. But yeah, like, who knows? But I'm just going to keep writing the kind of crazy stuff that I do, and seems to be working. People like it. But that was also a season, as we say. So the season of Juniper. Now we're doing a season of grief, and then might be a season of kind of like horror sci-fi. Who knows? Who knows where this is going to go?
Yeah, well, I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm sure it won't be a season of calm or a season of happy cozies. That's for
It's
sure.
season of romance books. Yeah, no, that's not on the cards.
But I mean, you mentioned Eric LaRocca, and I'm so glad that, in spite him having a lot of detractors and getting a lot of hate and shit, I'm so glad that he's also got a massive fan base that are really into the vision that he's creating, because, I mean, goodness, he relentlessly delivers these books anyway, no holds barred, authentically Eric LaRocca. But if you weren't getting those fans as well as the detractors, it's gonna be tough for your psyche. I mean, I don't know if it's tough anyway. If it is, then he just plows through it.
Yeah, I think it must be. He's an amazingly talented author, but I think if he didn't have the fan base that he had, it must be such an isolating, awful place to be. Like, because I've read some of the comments that people leave on his books, because they just pop up. Like, I don't go looking for them, if I was facing that day in, day out, I would just, I don't know. It would be really difficult. But Eric, if you're listening, I'm always here.
Oh yeah, Eric knows that we are big fans of his work at This Is Horror, and I'm sure we'll be talking very soon for the new one that's coming out. So keep your ears peeled. That is correct. Yeah, it is. He's announced a hell of a lot of books coming out.
He's doing a UK tour as well.
Oh my God.
Bath, I think, which is my nearest one. So I might try and get down.
Have you met in person before?
No. So when I was coming up in the world, as they say, me and Eric just started chatting and become very good friends. I've called him numerous times on the evening of the Stokers to like have a chat and wish him best. And we chat often. We haven't chatted for a little while, but I've not met them in person. But I'm really, it's in Bath, but I think it's during the week. But I'm going to try my hardest to get there, because I'd love to see him and just give him a cuddle, a shoulder to cry on if he needs it with all those bad reviews. But I'm there for you, Eric.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, before, to kind of shift towards your decision to write, the rest of your books set in Britain. I mean, you haven't publicly said, you're always going to write in Britain. That's not a firm line, but there is this challenge that I sometimes find too, because what we're both doing is we're setting work in the UK, and now me setting some in Japan as well. But we know that our core audience is in America. So, and also, I mean, often the publisher, the agent, the film manager, so every professional is in America. So when you're writing these books set in the UK, are you deliberately writing it in British English? Are you deliberately using British English spelling? Are you using British English words? Do you ever make a deliberate and conscious choice to use a bit of an Americanism or to soften it because that a lot of your readers are in America? So what are the decisions that you're making in that regard?
So the decisions I'm making are normally informed to me by my editor. But I would go into it and be like, right, I'm writing this in British English. I don't want any kind of Americanisms. So if you spot those whilst you're editing, I was like, you need to change them. And that was just a conscious kind of like, I was like, if I'm going to be writing about places in Britain and the stuff here, I was like, it needs to read like that. And I had thought, that might alienate some American readers. And, I have thought about that, but I was like, we're just going to go with it. And we're going to see what happens. I've not had any like blowback from any of the publishers that I've gone to in America. So, I'm with Clash, Trueborn Press, Cemetery Gates Media. Who else is there? Can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, but I've had no blowback regarding those kind of stories that I've sent their way. They've fully got on board with the vision and the story. And I think if you've got if the story's there, you don't have to worry about kind of the alienation, because people will just be pulled through. I read, you read like tons of American horror, and I know Americans that read lots of like British horror. So there's just not that much going the other way. But I think, like, I'd be lying if I didn't say I was kind of like nervous with the ones that were just set in Britain, and kind of being like, is it going to do well? Are people going to get it? And I proper go all out on the Britishness. Like, I'm from London, so I chuck in loads of Cockney rhyming slang in there as well and everything, just to give it the authenticity that I want. And some of the books, obviously, when I was living in Bristol, I was writing about places in Bristol, and they're obviously they're all real places. And when I talk about driving from one place to another in a book, all the roads are exactly it's exactly the same. But yeah, so when I was writing about in Bristol, there's lots of the kind of the Bristolian dialect in there, and the characters speak with that twang. Not all of the characters are Bristolian, but like that is in there. And now I'm living in Wales. I'm going to start using this area as kind of the bedrock for some other kind of horrors, and we'll go from there and just see how it goes. But I really like it. I think the next book I'm writing is set back in America, so you'll have me back for a little bit, and we'll just see what the kind of sales are for that one. I like, but like the sales are good. Like I'm not seeing a dip in kind of those horrors, and particularly like I Die Too, but They Haven't Buried Me Yet blew up. So that was great sales, and that's really British and set in Bristol. And so I think, it's either my readership is growing, and they're very what's the word, keen to keep reading me, but I also know that book has like gone really wide in terms of distribution, which I've not had before, and it's sold really well, and Barnes and Nobles across America keep on buying it and putting it in their stock. So I'm reaching a demographic that I hadn't ever dreamed of, whether that's through Clash's kind of statement as being the publisher, or booksellers really pushing it because they've read it and they like it. Who knows? But that book is doing good numbers, and I'm excited for them to be re-releasing Devil's Pocketbook, which has been out of publication since a publisher that shall not be named went under and took royalties. But anyway, but yeah, I'm looking forward to them having that book, because that book's special. Folklore, that is very British, set in Cornwall, in a place called Polperro. Lots of horror, lots of grief, lots of suffering, good suffering. But it's been obviously out of publication for over a year, and I'm just really excited for it to get back on the market, and with Clash as well, and the sales of I Die 2, I'm hoping that lots of other kind of Barnes and Noble will start carrying it because of the success of the other book. We shall see. I've forgotten the question, but I think that's a good answer.
Well, I mean, the question was talking about, that decision when you have the American audience, but you're setting something in the UK. And I mean, certainly what you're doing is similar to what I've done when I've set something in the UK. It's like it's in the UK, so we're using British English, we're using British spellings, we're using British references. That's it. But I'm kind of at this interesting place now where I'm setting more and more things in Japan. So now there's all sorts of kind of dilemmas and quandaries. And I mean, for example, living here in Japan, I meet more Americans than I do Brits. And then when I'm speaking to Japanese people in English, they are more familiar with American English than they are British English. And so one of the things it's done, and probably hosting this as horror podcast where we speak more with Americans as well, it's almost like I'm kind of fluid with whether I'm using British or American English, and everything has merged into one. And so rather than a word being, oh, this is what the Brits say, this is what the Americans say, they're just synonyms, they're just alternative words. So, I mean, to actually represent a Brit living in Japan, you would probably have them mostly use British English, but occasionally American English. And it's like sometimes
that's quite a cool hybrid, though. Like to use that in a book would be incredible.
It is cool, but it's one of these things, and I was speaking to another friend where it's like sometimes reality and authenticity can seem like an error to the people who don't know. So it's like I'm going to be called out potentially for making errors when it's like, no, those are deliberate choices. This is actually the experience. But then the other dilemma I have, because particularly the next few books that I'm working on, whilst they have Western characters as the protagonists, there are a lot of secondary characters who are Japanese, and they're speaking Japanese, but I'm translating into English because otherwise then the whole market's gone, and so then I often I'm thinking, well, this is a Brit translating Japanese. So actually, sometimes, like, it might be very British what they say because that is the British equivalent. It's kind of capturing the flavor of the character. But also, I thought, well, sometimes you could decide, oh, well, this character, the translation is going to be more American. And so there's all sorts of dilemmas that have kind of jumped in now. So I suppose on that basis, if you were to set a story abroad and you were to use, characters from a different nationality, but you're obviously writing it in English, are you going to go British English because that's who you are? Or are you going to go American English because that would be the more natural translation? Or has this conversation inspired you to be like, you know what, we're doing the hybrid?
Next book, all hybrid. It's quite funny because the book I've just finished writing, called Love Will Tear Us Apart, it's a novel, but it's basically a found manuscript. So the person writing it or who has written the book, not me, this person has written the book, uses footnotes in it because it's a found manuscript. So the manuscript originally had lots of written kind of bits on it, but it's their first book they've ever written. So in the book, I was like, that's a really good idea. And then I started writing it, and I started doing lots of errors in it. So, continually using the rule of three, so having three lots of like explanations. And then I thought to myself, if I use footnotes, I can also take the piss a little bit and just be like, oh yeah, it's my first book. I've read about the rules of three, but I don't quite understand it, and then just have them pop up throughout, because I didn't do it with footnotes to start with, and as I was reading it, I was just like, I wrote it and I reread it, and I was like, oh yeah, people are going to think I've gone mental, because like I've put loads of errors in it on purpose, and I was like, I'm going to need to make sure that they don't think I've slipped backwards in my writing. But that was an interesting way of doing it. So, like, I guess footnotes could be used to unlock some of that kind of hybrid thing you were talking about. Like, but who knows? I think it's a good idea. I think you should run with it. I think you should write a trilogy of hybrid books.
Well, who knows? Maybe that will happen. I mean, probably a lot of my books could be very loose trilogies or part of loose series, but yeah. I think in terms of the rule of three or any writing rules that we learn, I mean, firstly, we need to learn the rules, and then we make these conscious decisions whether we are or are not going to break them. And so, I mean, Chuck Palahniuk, for example, since we're talking about the rule of three, he's like, never use a list with three things. Always go for two or for four. Now, I'm very aware of that advice, so quite often I do. But then sometimes I just deliberately decide, no, three feels right here.
Yeah,
It's almost like the more you know, the more it can almost become stifling or suffocating. Or, I mean, you write in spite of it, but you can just think, oh, is someone going to think you didn't know that rule? It's like, no, I did. I just decided not to follow it.
Because I'm a rogue. I'm a renegade.
Yeah.
Because I'm reading a book at the minute. So my editor Andy, he said read this book. I think it's called Dryer's English. So it was just kind of a book about the craft and like punctuation. And we spoke on the last podcast the fact that I struggle with it a lot. So he said I think you'd really enjoy it. So I was reading that, and that has a lot of rules in it as well. And it was like we learn these rules like the Oxford comma and all this kind of stuff, and obviously it tells you how to write properly. And I've read in there certain bits that were like, this used to be how you wrote thoughts, like in like speech marks, whatever, and then it was like italics. Now you just write it normally, or some writers don't differentiate between speaking and dialogue and like narration, the rest of it. And I was like, oh, okay. And there's things like, oh yeah, people tell you that you shouldn't start a sentence with and or but. And it's like, but sometimes just do it. I was like, yeah, just do it. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Honestly, like, I mean, I think the don't start with and but is something that you learn fairly early on. But recently I've found I just kind of like doing that. And I think it elevates and makes the story better. So I think we can learn all sorts of rules, but particularly when you get a bit of experience with what you're doing, intuition and just personal aesthetic is worth so much more. And also because we're writing fiction, and we're often both of us were writing fiction with a strong voice, being true to that voice is far more important than being grammatically correct or following a rule. Yeah, when I'm grammatically incorrect, that is a deliberate decision.
Yeah, definitely. Rule breakers. That's the best way to be.
That's the title of this episode, Rule Breakers with Ross Jeffery.
Rule breakers and a shot of whiskey. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to Ross Jeffery on This Is Horror. Join us again next time for the second and final part. But what if you can't wait? What if you want to be listening to more Ross Jeffery right now. Well, you can. All you need to do is become a patron at www. Nobody says www, do they? At patreon.com/this is horror. Not only can you listen to the next part with Ross Jeffery, you can listen to all episodes ahead of the crowd. You'll also get the full conversation with no adverts, and you'll get that before anyone else. And there are Patreon exclusive podcasts too. So a lot of good reasons to join us. Head over to patreon.com/thisishorror or www.patreon.com/thisishorror. It'll still work if you write that triple W in, it's just redundant. And support independent horror podcasting today. Patreon.com/thisishorror. Okay, before I wrap up, a quick advert break.
It was as if the video had unzipped my skin, slunk inside my tapered flesh, and become one with me.
From the creator of This Is Horror comes a new nightmare for the digital age, The Girl in the Video by Michael David Wilson. After a teacher receives a weirdly arousing video, his life descends into paranoia and obsession. More videos follow, each containing information no stranger could possibly know. But who's sending them, and what do they want? The answers may destroy everything and everyone he loves. The Girl in the Video is The Ring meets Fatal Attraction for the iPhone generation. Available now in paperback, ebook, and audio. From the host of This Is Horror podcast comes a dark thriller of obsession, paranoia, and voyeurism. After relocating to a small coastal town, Brian discovers a hole that gazes into his neighbor's bedroom. Every night she dances and he peeps. Same song, same time, same wild and mesmerizing dance. But soon Brian suspects he's not the only one watching, and she's not the only one being watched. They're watching is The Wicker Man meets Body Double with a splash of Suspiria. They're Watching by Michael David Wilson and Bob Pastorella is available from thisishorror.co.uk, Amazon, and wherever good books are sold.
Before I go, I wanted to thank all of you who continue to read, talk about, and support my dark comedy novel, Daddy's Boy. It seems to be a little-known book, but those who respond well to it really, really love it. And speaking of which, later this week, I will be talking to Greg Green for his podcast and YouTube channel, and he is currently reading Daddy's Boy. In anticipation of that, he recently had this to say over on Blue Sky. Oh my gosh, this book is so inappropriate. I'm interviewing Michael David Wilson of the legendary podcast and publisher This Is Horror later this week about his book Daddy's Boy, and I'm learning all kinds of colourful new British terms and aphorisms to deploy on this side of the pond. Well, hope you'll use those terms and aphorisms wisely, Greg. But thank you so much for reading Daddy's Boy, and I can't wait to chat with you in just a few days. So, with that said, until the next episode for part 2 with Ross Jeffery, take care of yourselves, be good to one another, read horror, keep on writing, and have a great, great day.
This is Horror Podcast.